On your way home today, make sure that you check your routes. My goodness. My goodness. I knew the day would come where we would have to analyze, to a greater extent, Sctatchman Apoo. Just like for Jewelry Bonnie, Supernova that haven't had the limelight, at some point in the future are going to showcase various things. And once they showcase these things, we're going to have to analyze and dissect them. And Apoo, I knew was inevitable. But I was not expecting the last chapter of One Piece, chapter 980. 980, the fighting music of Sctatchman Apoo was impressive. I ain't gonna front. Sctatchman Apoo gets hard W's in chapter 980 because Sctatchman Apoo is doing the business to one Monkey D. Luffy and his quote-unquote right-hand man, Zoro. We're talking about the quote-unquote fifth emperor.
近々この最悪の世代と呼ばれる者たちの中から海賊王が誕生すると
The fifth emperor. Great quote by Flames that I posted on Twitter. I had to. The fifth emperor and his, again, quote-unquote right-hand man, Zoro, run from Apoo. How? Oh my goodness. Wow. Apoo's showing in the last chapter was impressive. Very impressive. And it looks to me like, at least for a few seconds, Luffy gets temporarily knocked out. Again, just temporary. Because the boy does bounce back. The man is rubber, he bounces back. But can't deny it. Apoo looking pretty good. Pretty good. A lot of folks believe that in Supernova rankings, when it comes to, let's say, power scaling stuff, which of course I'm a big fan of, I love power scaling. A lot of folks believe that Zoro and Luffy are ahead of Apoo. But other folks believe that because Apoo and Capone are captains, Jewelry Bonnie as well, they're captains, and Killer and Zoro are not captains, they must be the weakest of the Supernova. And this chapter, in some sense, does solidify this. To an extent, obviously, to an extent. I would argue that in more ways than one, this is a Caesar Clown situation where Zoro and Luffy, I would argue, are stronger than Apoo, but because of a sneak attack or underestimating the ability of the user, or for various other reasons, they don't look so hot against weaker guys. Of course, the details of this are Apoo's powers and abilities as to what is Apoo doing exactly with his, let's say, Oto no Mi, the sound fruit, maybe something like that. Because clearly he's attacking with sound. And it's very potent to where, for a brief moment, Monkey D. Luffy seemingly is knocked out. Seemingly. And I do want to say, at the end of the chapter, Kid does attack Apoo with the Punk Gibson, and if Apoo is knocked out from that attack, then that's not a good sign for Apoo. But for this video, the focus is not Apoo's physical strength nor his hockey game. It is, of course, his devil fruit. The Oto no Mi, the sound fruit. Let's break it down like this. This, I think, can be misunderstood to be a really broken ability, and I will acknowledge that it could be broken, but I don't think it is. And for this, we have to kind of go back to the pre-time skip in Shibuya Archipelago when Apoo attacked one Admiral Kizaru. Now, against Kizaru, what we see is, of course, Apoo's body turned to various instruments. He's on a building roof or a building top, and Kizaru is fighting against Hawkins and Drake with a pacifist on the ground floor. And once we have the music playing, we do see Apoo do a scratch and slash by banging on his head, and then the symbol kind of rings. And then we see the slash and the cut, and then Kizaru's arm gets cut off. His right arm gets cut off. And then Kizaru kind of confused what's going on. So the slight difference between the pre-time skip and the post-time skip for Apoo in this case is that when he does the scratch attack, it's a punch attack of some kind. Whereas in the pre-time skip, it was both scratch and slash, and then Kizaru's hand gets cut off. So obviously, over the course of the time skip, all these guys got better, including Apoo. So Apoo's scratch and slash attack in the pre-time skip can cut off Kizaru's arm, whereas in the post-time skip, that scratch attack is independent as a punch. In the manga, so there is a difference between the manga and the anime for this one. In the manga, Apoo goes boom, and then we see the explosion occur on Kizaru from his waist up. And then there we see how Kizaru was exploded into half, essentially. And this is in complete lockstep with the recent chapter, 980, where the attack that kind of cut Kizaru or explode him in half, Luffy eats head on. Now, potentially, when he does the boom attack potentially goes inside of Luffy and explodes from the inside out. Potentially it does. We're not too sure, it's not too clear at all. But when Luffy, after taking the boom attack, his mouth is open and we see the smoke coming out of his mouth, which I think in some degree does imply the explosion was internal rather than external. And what's also important is that after Luffy is attacked for the first time, both Zoro and Luffy are staring at Apoo, which means at this point in time, there is no real surprise attack, especially when Luffy has very good observation haki, to the point where he's doing like the Rayleigh and Thunder Sonia, where he's reading attacks ahead of time quite easily. And to an extent, like what we see with Babanuki, Old Maid, he can probably see the future when it comes to attacks and intent. Now granted, Luffy and Zoro may have been too flustered or too surprised, because again, Apoo did, he did spook him, which is, again, it's nuts how Apoo can spook people of that level, because I would regard Luffy and Zoro to be stronger than Apoo, honestly. Like Luffy even more so. Like I don't think Luffy's the strongest of the Supernova. And yet Apoo, though granted the first shot was a sneak attack, after that first shot, I can't say that. It's really hard to say that. So Luffy and Zoro are staring at Apoo, and then you have the slash and the boom. So Apoo's attacks are now deemed invisible, essentially, until they hit their target, or until they activate in some way, shape, or form. Now, how this works exactly, of course, we don't know just yet, but there are several ways in which this could happen. One of the ways is that he attacks internally through his sound. Very similar to, let's say, Whitebeard, or a Reject Dial, or a Impact Dial, or a Rogue Ogan, where the attacks that Apoo does are based internally first, and then from the inside out he attacks. So when Zoro took that slash, that was from the inside out. When Luffy took the explosion, the boom, that was from the inside out. Which is why, again, the smoke came out from Luffy's mouth. Even in the case of Kizaru in chapter 509, the explosion that we see is happening specifically on the upper half of his body, but not the lower half of his body. That's relatively fine. And so if that's the case, then that's pretty powerful. That's pretty devastating. Now, some folks do argue that he's actually reopening old wounds, but that's, I think, ridiculous because, again, in the case of Luffy, we have an explosion attack. That's not a wound. The same for Kizaru. And Kizaru, as far as we know, wasn't like cut in the past on his arm to the point where his arm could get cut off in the past, as far as we know. And in this case, when it comes to Zoro, a lot of folks are saying that Apoo reopened Zoro's old Mihawk wound, which I don't think folks realize that if that was the case, that would be such a huge blow to Zoro injury-wise, where he probably couldn't just grab Luffy and then just run away. Remember, Zoro passed out because of Killer's shot earlier in the arc, so there is no way that Mihawk's old wound reopening wouldn't be a tremendous blow. So I am highly doubtful that's actually the case. But him attacking internally could be the case here, which would make Apoo's ability pretty good, like pretty damn good, from range, a sizable range. In the past, he was on top of a building and attacked Kizaru, who was on the ground floor. So if that range is, let's say, 20, 30 meters, then that's a pretty sizable range based on the pre-time skip. And so in the post-time skip, that'll probably be more, because you do see later on that chapter, 980, where Luffy and Zoro are quite a bit away from Apoo, but Apoo claims, no, check it out, check your route, you're still in my range. So that range of Apoo is unclear for the time being, obviously, clearly. However, the range is probably the least important thing. The potency is good enough to where, again, it puts Zoro on his knee and it temporarily knocks out Luffy with the explosion attack. And then the invisibility factor is also another very important factor where, again, you can't see the attacks moving. And essentially, you can't really see sound. However, what's very intriguing is the anime is a bit different in the pre-time skip with Kizaru, where in the anime, the boom attack that he does in the manga is not actually called boom, but more so, he says, here we go. Here we go! And he hits his chest or hits his stomach. And from there, we see like a weird ring of fire kind of pulse from Apoo's body. And then that ring of fire travels, I guess, through sound. And then it hits Kizaru, but Kizaru can't see that ring of fire. As far as I can tell, he can't see that ring of fire. So it's a really strange thing there, where in the anime it does a ring of fire, but no one can seemingly see the ring of fire. So essentially, Apoo's attacks seem to be invisible because you cannot see the sound itself. However, they are targeted, meaning the entire area doesn't combust, or the entire area isn't hit with a shockwave or a slash, but more so the attack is targeted. Furthermore, based on the anime, it is also implied that it's not internal, but more so external. So keeping it simple, I don't believe that Apoo's abilities are that broken, but more so they're invisible, which makes it kind of hard to gauge if you don't have good observation haki. Because again, the attacks are pinpointed. At least for the time being, they're pinpointed. They're not spanning all over the place, because the sound waves in a certain area are being affected to either cut or impact like a punch or create an explosion. So in Apoo's case, he should do bad against someone that has very good observation haki, and they know when the attack is coming so they can dodge, because Apoo has to target the attacks at said individual, potentially. And then from the sound traveling from his weird instrument parts, Apoo can then attack someone externally. The reason why Luffy was kind of coughing up like smoke is probably because the explosion encompassed his entire body. Not more so happened internally, but more so his whole front was exposed to the explosion. Now, there is a possibility that does actually make Apoo's ability look pretty broken if it is the case. However, I would still argue that this can be solved with observation haki, but you would need something else on top of that. With that being said, there was a lad that or potentially a lady, there was someone named the Geist that commented in a recent YouTube video of mine. According to them, Apoo creates the sound waves of music. When he does the attack, it's already done. When he finishes the song, the attack is instant. They aren't sound projectiles like people think they are. And that's probably the reason why Luffy can't dodge, on top of not knowing the ability. So the attacks are instant, very similar to, let's say, Law. When Law does switch objects, that is instant, or quote-unquote instant. Now, I would argue that some time does pass between attacks, because in the case of the boom, when Apoo does do boom, we do see a small panel of Luffy right next to that panel of Apoo going boom, and then the explosion hits. However, if it is instant, then I think that this can be solved still with observation haki, but you also need extraordinary speed on top of that. Apoo's attacks are still targeted and pinpoint towards the individual. So let's say when Apoo does his music or his song, he creates a field, and within that field he has select targets. So Zoro and Luffy are targets when he creates that sound field. And if you're in that field and you're not moving fast enough, or you stand still, like what Luffy and what Zoro and like even what Kizaru did, then you're gonna get tagged pretty hard because you're still in Apoo's field. And this is where the speed would come in. Because again, even though the attack in this case could be literally instant, the attack is still targeted. Which means that Apoo, as far as we know, has to be aware of where you are and where your location is within that field. in order to make sure that the attack hits you. Or maybe hit is the wrong word here, and instead of using hit, we can, let's say, him playing the music is the way he activates the attack to spontaneously affect and damage the target. So if you have, again, very good observation hockey and your speed is tremendous, you know something is coming but you don't know exactly what it is. What you would then do is you would just blitz. You would literally blitz outside of Apoo's field of vision, or you would move so fast to where Apoo couldn't properly track you. So hitting a Gear 2 blitzing Luffy versus a standing still Luffy are night and day. And even if Apoo can still hit them despite them moving at that speed, let's say, because let's say you're still in his field regardless, you're still in his range regardless, so it's kind of like a Halo 3 sticky bomb where once it's attached, it's still going to go off. There is a good chance that because someone is blitzing and darting around, Apoo won't have enough time to produce more powerful attacks in this case, because we can use Douglas Bullet and Stampede as an example, where Apoo did not have the leisure of actually playing out a long tune and doing a fairly powerful attack like what we saw against Kizaru, I'd argue. More so what we see are him doing quick boom attacks and Douglas Bullet being virtually fine. And so using that movie as a model, if you pressure Apoo, Apoo's attacks should, in theory, become far less potent. Apoo, I'll give him credit. Against Luffy and Zoro, I did not expect it in the slightest at all. And Apoo is more powerful than I give him credit for. So in my tier list of Supernova, I have to raise Apoo a rank. A rank. 1 rank. Not 2, not 3, 1. And so for me, what that means is I had Apoo below guys like Drake and Hawkins. But now after this chapter, I'll put him in that same camp. And a lot of folks that support Apoo, this chapter was a good chapter. This chapter was 100% a good chapter, undoubtedly. I mean, it's one thing for Apoo to do this kind of stuff. It's a whole nother matter to do this against Zoro and Luffy. That is truly, truly shocking. But I won't go too far and say that his powers are like as broken as Law. No, hell no. We gotta see a lot more from Apoo. So Apoo gets the limelight, and Apoo is pretty impressive. And for me, he raises a full tier in power, without question. So, obviously, guys and gals, that's it. Let me know your stance on the latest chapter at hand, 980 and Sctatchman Apoo. What has changed in your mind for Sctatchman Apoo? Be sure to rate the video. It is not that hard to do, because I guarantee you that, because I know that you all have a device called Zmousu. You use Zmousu to click, rate the video, to click, subscribe, to click on that bell to join the squad. And of course, as always, feel free to, please do, once again, comment in the comment section down below. Peace, and have a nice goddamn day.